Luke and his bareheaded friends appeared on either side of them. Argreus and Aureus grabbed Annabeth and Grover tight, but Tyson knocked them down hard and rustled them to the ground. "Percy," Luke said, "why don't you tell your ugly friend to back down unless he wants both your friends' heads smashed together?" "What do you want, Luke?" Percy growled. Luke gestured towards the nearby dock, and in that direction was the Princess Andromeda. "I simply want to extend my hospitality, of course," Luke said. The heroes were forced aboard the Princess Andromeda and were thrown down on the open deck in front of a swimming pool where Luke's disordered goons surrounded them. Laestrygonians, armed demigods, and other creeps had all gathered to watch the heroes get some hospitality. "Now the fleece," Luke said. "Where is it?" "Not here where you could take it from us," Percy said. Though he thought telling him anything at all might be bad, but saying the truth to Luke's face felt good. "It's already on its way to fix up your mess." Luke's eyes narrowed. "You're lying. There's no way you could have... Wait a minute. You mean you get Clarice?" "Yeah, that's right," Percy said. "Argreus!" Luke growled. "Go get me my steed. I have to get to the Miami airport." When the bear man left the deck, Luke started gripping his sword so tight while pacing around the deck and cursing in ancient Greek. The rest of his crew looked uneasy. Maybe they'd never seen their boss look so unhinged before. Percy started thinking if he could use Luke's anger and get him to talk, maybe everybody could hear how crazy his plans were and possibly turn them against him. Then Percy looked at the swimming pool. Its fountain shot lines of water up and down and that left sprays of mist hanging in the air, creating a rainbow in the daylight, and then suddenly Percy had an idea. "This was your plan all along," he said to Luke. "You set us up. You let us go and tricked us into bringing you the fleece just to save you the trouble of getting it yourself." "Of course I did, you idiot," Luke said. "You're a traitor," Percy said. Then he pulled out his last drachma and threw it past Luke, and it disappeared through the rainbow-colored mist. With all his heart, hoping his prayer would be accepted in silence, Percy concentrated on who he wanted to see, and said in his mind, "Oh, dear goddess, please accept my offering." Then he looked back at Luke and pulled out his sword and yelled, "You tricked us all! The whole camp! Even Mr. D!" "This is not the best time for heroics, Percy," Luke said. "Now why don't you put that puny little sword of yours away before I change my mind?" "Whose idea was it exactly to poison the tree?" Percy demanded. "I told you, me," Luke said. "I just used elderly python venom straight from the depths of Tartarus." "So Chiron had nothing to do with it?" "Of course not. As if that old fool would even have the guts to ever do that." "You call betraying your friends and endangering the whole camp having guts?" "You don't understand the half of it. I was going to let you take the fleece once I was done with it." That made Percy hesitate. Why would Luke let him take the fleece? He must have been lying, but Percy couldn't afford to lose his attention. "You were going to heal Kronos, weren't you?" he said. "Well, duh, of course I was," Luke answered. "If it's magic and fix the whole landscape, then surely it can restore a Titan Lord to its old self again. But you never really stopped us, Percy. You've only slowed us down a little." "So you poisoned the tree, betrayed Thalia, and set us all up just to help Kronos to destroy the gods?" Luke gritted his teeth. "If you already know, why keep asking me?" Percy smiled. "To make sure the audience in the back heard you." He pointed to the pool, and Luke gasped when he saw an iris message revealing Dionysus, Tantalus, and the rest of the campers in the dining tables. They sat and watched the whole thing in stunned silence. "Well, it looks like we have received some unplanned dinner entertainment here tonight," said Mr. D. "Mr. D, you heard him, right? About Chiron not being the one who poisoned the tree?" Percy asked. "Yes, I suppose he did not," Mr. D sighed. "The image could be a trick," said Tantalus, though most of his attention was on his cheeseburger, which he tried to corner with both hands, but it just kept automatically moving away. "I fear not," said Mr. D, looking at Tantalus with distaste. "It appears I shall have to reinstate Chiron as activities director. And I suppose I do miss the old horse's pinochle games." Tantalus grabbed his cheeseburger, and it didn't pull away from him. He stared in amazement while holding it up. I got it!" he cackled. "I believe we are no longer in need of your services, Tantalus," said Mr. D. "You are now dismissed from camp, and you may return to the underworld." "What? No!" Tantalus said. "No!" He disappeared, and his burger dropped right back on the plate. Tantalus was gone. The campers cheered. The deed was done. Luke bellowed with rage. He slashed his sword at the iris message right as it dissolved. Percy felt pretty good about himself, at least until Luke turned and gave him a murderous look. "You'll never leave this boat alive," Luke said. "If you want me dead, why don't you do it yourself, like last time?" Percy asked. "Kronos was right about you, Percy," Luke growled. "You're an unreliable weapon, and you need to be replaced." Just then, they were interrupted by the sound of a screeching Pegasus that Argyrius pulled onto the deck. Just looking at it kind of felt scary, but at the same time, it was beautiful. It was the very first pure black Pegasus Percy had ever seen, with its black feathered wings like the wings of a giant raven. It whinnied in pain, and Percy understood its thoughts. It called Luke and his followers names so bad, Chiron probably would have washed its mouth out. "Your steed is ready, sir," said Argyrius. Luke kept his eyes on Percy. "You can't beat me in a fight, Jackson," he said. "And you keep avoiding one. Are you scared to let your friends see you get whipped?" Luke glanced at his men, and now Percy had him trapped. Luke knew if he had backed down now, he would look weak. Percy knew it was the perfect distraction to buy Clarice some time, and hopefully it would give his friends a chance to escape. If anybody could think of a plan to get them out of there, Annabeth could. On the downside, Percy knew how good Luke was at sword fighting. "I'll kill you quickly," Luke decided. He whistled to one of his men, who threw him a shield. "Luke," said Annabeth, "at least make it even and let him have a shield." "Sorry, you bring your own," he said. A shield was another one of Percy's problems. Fighting two-handed with just a sword gives you more power, but fighting one-handed with a shield gives you better defense and versatility. There are more moves, and more options, and more ways to kill. Percy thought back when Chiron told him to stay at camp no matter what and continue his training. Now he was going to regret not listening to him. Luke charged and almost killed Percy on the first try. He backed out of the way in time and raised Riptide, but Luke slammed the blade away with his shield. My, Percy," Luke chided. "You're out of practice." He came at Percy again with a swipe to the head, but Percy dodged right on time. Then Luke came behind Percy easily and gave him a cut at the back of his ankle. The pain was so intense Percy collapsed. He couldn't get up, and he started to crawl backwards away from Luke. Luke advanced on him slowly, with Percy's blood on his sword. "Here's one thing I want you to watch before you die," he said. He looked towards Aureus, as he held up Grover and Annabeth. "You can have your dinner now, Aureus," Luke said. "Bon appetit." The bear man lifted Percy's friends and opened his mouth impossibly wide, and right at that moment was when all Hades broke loose. An arrow whooshed into Aureus's mouth and he stumbled backwards. Then the Pegasus rose up and knocked his brother in the head and flew away free. The bear twins' bodies dissolved into smoke. Then all everybody could hear was the roar of a million hooves stomping metal. A group of centaurs charged onto the deck, and Percy recognized one of them. It was Chiron. Thank the Olympians. He did say he was visiting his relatives, but if these centaurs were them, none of them looked anything like him at all. Only some had white horse fur like him, while others had black fur, or brown, or gray. Some of them wore coats, while others wore shirts that said, "Party Ponies." Some carried bows or baseball bats. Some even carried paintball guns. Even Luke was stunned. As he raised his sword, one centaur shot a custom-made arrow with a boxing glove arrow in the front. It smacked Luke in the face and sent him crashing into the swimming pool. "Come and get some!" one of the centaurs shouted. All of Luke's followers skedaddled as the centaurs fired their paintballs. Who could blame him? Chiron may be the only civilized centaur in the world, while every other one would choose to act pretty wildly. Chiron galloped over to Annabeth and Grover, and they jumped onto his back. Luke stuck his head out of the pool. "You'll never get away with this!" he shouted. But then he got knocked in the head with a boxing glove arrow. Again. Another centaur walked over to Percy and said, "Dude, get your big friend and let's go!" "Tyson!" Percy shouted. "It's time to leave!" Tyson finished his own fight and went over to join Percy on the centaur's back. "Whoa!" said the centaur, trying to keep himself up. "Dude, does low diet mean anything to you?" Then they followed the other centaurs to the edge of the deck and fearlessly jumped over the edge as if it were a steeplechase and not 10 stories above the ground. Most fortunately, not dying from the fall, the centaurs hit the asphalt as if it were just a few feet down. Then they started galloping down the road and carried the demigods to safety. They were running at the speed of light and sound, and next thing they knew, they left the city in just seconds. The heroes were safe and now heading home. Seconds later, they found themselves in a trailer park in a forest somewhere outside the city. In other words, a field of horse trailers. They were in a centaur camp. The demigods jumped off the centaurs' backs, and Percy looked at Chiron.